Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are wrestling with, I think, one of the most enduring and frankly beautiful mysteries of human civilization.
Which
The
is,
deep, persistent, and often baffling urge to create art. I mean, why do we long to express ourselves through paint or music or architecture?
it's a huge question. Because if you look at art purely through a functional lens, a Darwinian lens, it is utterly useless.
Completely useless.
Right.
A painting doesn't help you find food.
A symphony won't fend off a
Oh,
tiger,
yeah.
and a massive marble sculpture is definitely not keeping you warm at night.
Yeah.
And yet we sanctify it.
We do. We build entire museums for it. We pay millions, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars for a single piece. It is by definition an extravagant and non-essential expenditure of time and resources.
So that's the puzzle. That's the evolutionary puzzle we're looking at.
Exactly. If basic survival natural selection prioritizes efficiency above all else, why on earth would nature allow us to evolve such a high-cost, time-consuming, and seemingly irrelevant luxury?
Well, the sources we've gathered for this deep dive suggest a pretty radical answer.
Okay, let's unpack this.
The theory we're diving into today is maybe the sexiest, most provocative idea in evolutionary biology. And it's this. Creativity, art, high intelligence, all these complex human achievements, they did not evolve primarily for survival.
Not for survival.
No. They evolved for one primal reason. Courtship.
Clicks.
Basically, yeah. We're suggesting that our collective turn-ons,
Yeah.
our aesthetic preferences, our judgments of what's good or what's beautiful, that's actually the greatest driving force shaping not just the shape of our bodies, but the very architecture of our minds. We're talking about sexual selection as the engine of human complexity.
So our mission today is to really analyze the evidence for this theory. We're going to contrast this powerful reproductive drive with the more familiar, day-to-day mechanisms of just basic survival.
Precisely. We aim to show how early humans essentially bred themselves into being smart, witty, creative, all through the sheer power of who they chose to partner with. And the implications of that are just enormous.
It reframes everything. I mean, the organism isn't just responding to the environment anymore.
No, it's self-creating, in a way, constantly selecting for what it finds attractive.
But to really get our heads around this, to grasp the mechanism of this radical idea, we have to start with the ultimate evolutionary analogy.
The maestro.
The undisputed maestro of high-cost, non-essential signaling, the bowerbird.
Let's talk about the bowerbird. The sources introduce this creature with amazing flair. They call the male the womanizer of the art world.
And when you examine the sheer magnitude of his effort, you absolutely understand why. This creature is central to the whole theory of art as sexual advertisement.
It's the perfect caricature of the theory. The structure the male builds, it's not just some little nest. It's a multi-ton aesthetic project. The sources call it a gigantic Taj Mahal.
And that's not just hyperbole. They point out that this thing can weigh hundreds of times the bird's own body weight. I mean, just imagine the energy it takes to move and arrange all that material.
And here's the crucial part, the part you have to remember. Its utility. Or really, its lack of utility.
Right. It has no practical purpose whatsoever.
None. It offers zero protection from predators, it provides no shelter from the rain, and the female does not lay her eggs in it. It is built for one single moment.
To coax a female inside for, what is it?
For those famous, fleeting 3 seconds of sex.
3 seconds. All that work for 3 seconds.
It's pure, glorious waste, and that is the exact point. The sources describe how these structures just rise out of the drab, dark forest floor like hallucinations. They're these meticulously woven cathedrals, and they're decorated with an astonishing level of detail and color coordination.
We're not talking about just random junk he finds, right?
Oh no, this is curated. These are high-contrast installations. The sources give this wonderful inventory of his extravagance. He uses carefully selected materials, things like crushed flower pulp, iridescent butterfly wings, brightly colored berries.
And even human stuff, right? Like bits of plastic or glass if they're the right color.
Exactly. And the color scheme is usually monochromatic. The bird will often choose a single color, like a brilliant blue, and then he will go and source hundreds of different objects of that precise shade.
The cognitive load there must be insane. The bird has to remember where all these different resources are, differentiate between hundreds of slightly different shades of blue, and then perform some pretty complex architectural engineering to put it all together.
And some species take the artistry even further. They get into landscaping. The sources mention species that clear out a whole area, creating these meticulously maintained lawns of green moss. lawns
Yeah.
and paved avenues and promenades that lead directly up to the main structure. It's unbelievable.
So the bower is the canvas, the masterpiece. But that's only half the pitch, isn't it?
It's only half. The male's role is simultaneously artist and performer. He then executes this complex, high-energy, artistic performance around his work. He's strutting, he's singing, he's tap dancing. It's just high-stakes grandstanding.
And it's competitive. This isn't some peaceful artist retreat.
Not at all. The sources are clear that this is not peaceful artistry. Male bowerbirds actively watch and vandalize each other's bowers.
So they're art thieves and critics at the same time.
You got it. They steal the best, brightest, rarest trinkets, and they will strategically knock down pillars, trying to undermine the architectural symmetry of their rivals. It's a form of high-stakes, aggressive art criticism.
Which brings us to the core question of the theory. Who is the real art critic in this scenario, and what exactly are they looking for?
The critic is the female, and her role is incredibly demanding. It's judgmental. She inspects the bower, and not quickly either. She does it methodically.
And her criteria are specific.
Very precise. She's assessing the structure based on strict symmetry, balance, and the sophistication of the color coordination. She's looking for evidence of supreme mental fitness.
Because building something that complex and extravagant requires, well, excellent genes and a ton of focused effort.
It's a direct test of his brain function, his memory, his resourcefulness. But it's not just the architecture. She's also judging his physical performance, his ballet.
So the dancing matters just as much.
Absolutely. Symmetry and body coordination in the dance are highlighted as having immense aesthetic appeal. Think about it. If a male can sustain a flawless, complex dance routine while also maintaining and defending a perfect, complex structure.
That's the ultimate display of genetic health. It shows he can afford that massive energy cost and still thrive.
Exactly. So after months of this high-effort architectural and physical performance, the female makes her judgment. It might take her minutes, it might take hours. But once she decides, she steps inside the bower.
And the sources say the show is all the foreplay they get.
And the mating itself, as we said, is over almost instantly. But the real insight, the thing that really proves the theory, comes immediately after.
The post-mating contrast.
It's the most critical proof. The male's investment is entirely focused on the display. The moment it's over, he immediately resumes strutting for the next groupie. He starts fixing his bower, preparing for the next potential encounter.
But the female.
She leaves. She got what she needed, the genetic information. She goes off completely alone to build her own structure.
And this structure, the one where the kids will actually be raised, is described very differently.
As an efficient, teacup-sized nest.
Wow. So it's the starkest division of labor you can imagine.
Absolutely. The male specializes in the extravagant, highly inefficient, beautiful Taj Mahal of display. The female specializes in the small, purely utilitarian structure designed for optimum survival and efficiency in raising the offspring.
His work is entirely for what you'd call SS sexual selection. Hers is for NS natural selection and just pure logistical utility.
I find that division so fascinating because it suggests a complete specialization of effort based on evolutionary need. His art is a high-cost signal. Her nest is low-cost, high-efficiency logistics.
Which forces us to confront this idea that this beastly purpose, this reproductive imperative, might be the deep underlying reason for our own elevated human taste in art.
That's the challenge the sources lay out for us. When we appreciate a masterpiece, are we, subconsciously judging genetic fitness? It shifts the whole discussion from the loftiness of creativity to the primal effectiveness of high-cost signaling.
Okay, let's take that beastly purpose and apply it to us, to humans. To do that, we need to clearly distinguish between the two major forces shaping all species, natural selection versus sexual selection. The source material is adamant that one of them evolves us much, much faster than the other.
Right, and we need to establish the core idea here. The external environment, they need to find food, stay warm, avoid being eaten, that built our bodies to run and eat. That's natural selection. But that's only half the story.
What's the other half?
The other, faster and more complex half is that men and women bred each other to be smart, creative, witty, loyal, beautiful. We literally created our own minds and bodies over eons based on our collective, highly selective mate choices.
So mate choice isn't just a personal preference. It's a massive evolutionary mandate.
It is. The sources say that in mate selection, the whole species is at stake. If we consistently choose partners who are quick-witted or talented or kind, we are immediately selecting for those high-complexity genes in the next generation.
And to understand why sexual selection is so powerful and so fast, we have to look at the systems side by side. Let's start with the one everyone knows, natural selection, or NS.
NS is what most people think of with Darwin, survival of the fittest, solving environmental problems.
Right. The goal of NS is to solve problems in nature, improving how you move, optimizing digestion, detecting poisons, avoiding predators.
And because of that, the adaptations designed by NS have to follow strict rules. They must be cheap in energy costs, they must be efficient, and they must be specialized for their exact function.
Any adaptation that's too costly is a liability. Natural selection will just prune it away pretty quickly.
Exactly. And because the cruel, inanimate environment is constantly weeding out less efficient adaptations, the sources note there's very little variety among members of the same species when it comes to these NS traits.
So every cheetah's body is honed for optimum, elegant efficiency. Every mosquito's brain is basically the same.
Precisely. NS creates what the source calls the Spartan beauty of organisms. Think of a dolphin's hydrodynamic form, or an eagle's perfectly optimized wingspan, or a kangaroo's kidney, which is perfectly efficient at conserving water.
Even basic things, like the efficiency of sleep or the best way to find food.
All products of NS, functional, necessary, and extremely economical.
Okay, so that's Spartan utility. Now let's flip the aesthetic to high-cost signaling. Sexual selection, or SS?
If NS is about economy, SS is all about extravagance. The adaptations designed by sexual selection to impress mates have to be ostentatious, high cost, and most importantly, the more wasteful, the better.
The wastefulness is the point.
It is. It's a direct, almost boastful signal. It says, I possess such superior genetic quality, such an abundance of resources, and such high intelligence that I can afford to waste massive amounts of energy on something utterly useless.
Like a ridiculously large tail or a complex song.
It's a genetic display of fitness. A signal that says, I am so healthy and so smart that I can survive despite this ridiculous ornament. And crucially, unlike the uniformity of NS, SS is characterized by wild variety within species.
Okay, why the wild variety?
Because every single member of the same sex is trying to distinguish himself from his reproductive competitors.
Yeah.
The moment a trait becomes common, its signaling power goes down.
So you have to evolve something even more complex, more costly, or just more bizarre to stand out.
It's a constant arms race. And it's this push for competitive differentiation that drives complexity at warp speed. And it leads to the truly magnificent, yet totally impractical features in the natural world.
We're talking about what the source calls the Baroque show-offy beauty that sexual selection creates.
Yes. The male lion's massive, hot, energy-draining mane, the ridiculously oversized, clumsy tail of the peacock, the bright look-at-me colors of the toucan, the complex, short-lived geometry of a daffodil's flowers, all useless for day-to-day survival.
The contrast in behavior is just as telling. When you see a lion chasing down a wildebeest, that incredible speed and power, that hunting efficiency, that's pure natural selection. It's practical, it's specialized.
But the moment that same lion stops and he starts to furrow his mane, stick out his chest, and do that slow, deliberate strut towards a female.
Or when the lioness intentionally exposes her belly and raises her tail.
That is pure sexual selection behavior. It's the display, the pitch, the advertisement. It's totally separate from hunting efficiency.
So here's where it gets really interesting for me, the speed of evolution. You said sexual selection changes organisms much faster. How big is that difference, and what's driving it?
The sources really emphasize this. The critical difference is the selector. Natural selection relies on the inanimate environment, weather, disease, famine, terrain. The environment is cruel, but it's slow. It's indifferent to the organism. It weeds us out slowly.
It's a passive selection process.
Exactly. But sexual selection is active, conscious, and demanding. A horny animal cares very much whom it selects. The mate is judging you right now, and this judgment is precise, immediate, and the stakes are incredibly high.
If you fail the Bauer inspection, your genes stop right there.
That's it. And this intense, immediate selective pressure, repeated across countless generations, just amplifies desired traits at an astonishing rate. The trials of finding a discerning partner evolve us much, much faster than the trials of finding a steady supply of berries.
The implication, then, is that intelligence, wit, language, creativity, the most human things about us, are not just lucky accidents of survival.
They're high-cost signals we actively bred into ourselves because at some point they were sexy.
So that's the essential leap. If the bower bird is the architect of courtship, then we have to apply the exact same mechanism to human creativity.
Right. The urge we feel to create a massive symphony or a complex novel or a new theory of physics, it's fundamentally a display of mental fitness.
You strip away the loftiness, and art becomes, well, an advertisement. The sources present it as a form of sexual ornamentation.
And that's equivalent to the vibrant plumage of a bird or the complex, energy-intensive twitter of a chickadee. The better the singer, the more impressive the display, the higher the status, the better the mate.
The creation itself is the high-cost display. It signals to potential mates that the creator has this immense neurological capacity, this sustained focus, the access to resources,
Time, money, leisure.
and the raw intelligence needed to produce something deliberately complicated and wasteful.
And nothing illustrates this better than the famous anecdote the sources use about Pablo Picasso.
Right. So the sources ask a simple question. Why did Picasso, who was undeniably successful in reproductive terms, get so many partners?
They point out he was not conventionally attractive. He wasn't Robert Redford. He wasn't a snazzy dresser. He did not possess obvious physical beauty honed by natural selection.
He had high NS costs, you could say. He was short, he got older, maybe lacked some social graces. His physical appearance was irrelevant.
Correct. But here is where his sexual selection adaptation kicked in. The sources conclude that Picasso could make one hell of a bower, and he knew exactly how to strut and dance around it.
His art, his fame, his complexity, the sheer output of his genius, that was his bower. He was signaling status and mental capacity at the absolute highest level.
And the conclusion the source draws is pretty stark. Art is less grandeur than grandstanding. It forces us to reframe our whole cultural appreciation of genius.
So the genius isn't just expressing some sublime internal truth. They're signaling their genetic superiority and their resource capacity in the loudest, most extravagant way they can.
And this is why this theory connects so powerfully to your daily life, even in the most mundane modern interactions. Take resource displays, for instance.
Okay, let's connect that abstract idea of genius as grandstanding to something practical, like paying for a meal on a date.
The source material says you should put this modern experience in evolutionary perspective. So the next time you encounter someone complaining about the cost of a fancy dinner, which is a small, modern, socially acceptable display of resource capacity.
You should remind them of the bowerbird.
Exactly. In that world, they would have to build a giant structure 60 feet tall and weighing several tons, using only their beak and feet. And it had to defend it daily for months. The fancy dinner is a highly compressed, very cheap version of that same ancestral display.
So complaining about the expense of the date is essentially complaining about the required genetic grandstanding needed to secure a mate. It undermines the whole signal.
It does. And this concept goes way beyond dating. It leads to this provocative thought in the sources about viewing massive, wasteful, complex structures. They mention Trump Towers, but it could be any ultra-expensive, gold-plated, non-essential building.
You view them in this evolutionary light.
Right. If they aren't strictly functional, then they are gigantic, high-cost displays of competitive fitness, resource accumulation, and dominant status.
Yeah.
They're the ultimate human bower, built not for shelter, but for signaling.
So whether we are building actual bridges, or winning at the intellectual game of bridge, or composing a symphony, or putting up massive gold-plated skyscrapers, the underlying drive, whether we know it or not, is rooted in this success imperative we inherited.
That is the core argument for reproductive currency. The sources argue that we don't necessarily work so obsessively to succeed today in order to make more babies. Modern culture often decouples success and reproduction.
But we inherited the genes for the urge to succeed.
Precisely, because for millennia, success used to lead directly to more offspring and better offspring survival. The drive persists even when the immediate reproductive benefit is gone.
So the human mind is kind of chasing a ghost of a past evolutionary success metric.
It is that deep, relentless impulse to achieve, to impress, to accumulate, to signal high status. It's all rooted in the same bowerbird drive to make the most impressive display possible. We are compelled to create these signals because our ancestors who felt that compulsion were the ones who successfully reproduced.
That makes a lot of sense, but here's where humans get complicated. In a lot of nature, sexual ornamentation, the costly displays, it's heavily weighted toward the male, since they typically compete for female choice.
Right.
But the sources highlight that the exciting part about Homo sapiens is that ornamentation seems to have evolved in both sexes. So we need to explore the conditions under which female ornamentation appears in nature to really understand the human case.
Yeah, female sexual advertisement is definitely rare. Usually the female's biological investment in offspring is way higher, carrying the pregnancy, nursing, and so on. That makes her the limiting resource, and so the primary selector. The male usually has to compete more fiercely.
But the source material identifies two key conditions where that flips, where females evolve ornamentation and engage in competitive display. What are they?
Okay, so the first condition is when the females are what we call promiscuous, which means they're not locked into a single male, so they have to compete with each other for access to the available males, especially the high-value ones.
So the competition shifts from just male-male rivalry to include female-female rivalry.
Exactly. If there are a finite number of high-quality males with the best genes or resources, the females have to stand out and advertise their own fitness to secure that access. The traditional roles get inverted, or at least balanced out.
And the second condition?
The second condition is when a species is highly monogamous. In that case, both the males and the females have to impress each other to select and maintain a high-quality, long-term pair bond.
So both partners are investing deeply and both have to continually signal their worth.
Right. The general rule seems to be whoever doesn't face reproductive competition ends up drab and efficient. Whoever has to compete gets to be elaborate and costly.
And the sources have a great example of this, right? The crested auklet.
That's right, Aethia cristatella. It's a monogamous seabird. And in this species, both the male and the female have evolved this large, striking crest, a complex arrangement of feathers.
And the female uses her crest to signal to the male.
Yes, specifically to signal her health and vigor to him. It demonstrates she's a good choice for a mate and a reliable partner. It's a direct visual signal of SS fitness, and it's owned by both sexes.
Okay, let's connect this back to humans. The source material says the exciting and unusual thing about our species is that women evolved sexual advertisements, including physical ornamentation and artistic creativity, just as males did. So what does this tell us about the deep social history of our hominid ancestors?
This is the critical implication. The fact that both hominid men and women evolved these energetically expensive, complex, and unnecessary SS traits implies a universal competitive environment.
So during our formative evolutionary period, both sexes had to compete intensely for mates.
It seems so. It wasn't just males competing for passive female choice. Females were actively competing for male choice, likely balancing between those two conditions, seeking high-quality mates while also trying to maintain long-term bonds.
And without this fierce, sustained, universal competition among same-sex rivals, male against male and female against female, the sources argued there'd be no evolutionary reason to grow such costly, defining traits.
That competition is the pressure cooker that produced our unique complexity. Without it, we wouldn't have evolved traits like thick beards or various breast designs, complex language, or, crucially, the desire to build bridges or win at bridge.
Every high-level achievement, every unnecessary complexity in our bodies or minds is ultimately traced back to the competitive pressure of finding a good mate.
It's a compelling argument. The primary reason we're so much more complex and intellectually baroque than our primate relatives is because we were so much more judgmental, discerning, and competitive in our mating patterns. Our standards were higher, and the resulting evolutionary arms race produced genius.
So if we accept this intense division between display, the SS stuff, and logistics, the NS stuff, it lets us analyze human behavior in a totally new light.
And that leads us directly into the source material's anecdotal observations about highly specialized gender roles in parenting and labor. These observations are presented as behavioral evidence reflecting this deep evolutionary division of labor.
Specializing in mating display versus specializing in logistics and child-rearing efficiency.
Exactly. And this is where we move from the high theory of art evolution to the very practical and kind of shocking specialization of motherhood versus fatherhood. The source provides this wonderfully detailed anecdote, the Boy Scout island trip.
Where the fathers were separated from the world of women for a whole week.
Right. And the specifics of this account are crucial because they show the complete shutdown of the SS display system when that selective pressure is removed. The fathers, many of whom were apparently strict disciplinarians at home, instantly gave up all discipline the moment they got to this isolated Canadian island.
They just stopped.
Stopped everything. Stopped bathing, stopped shaving, and lost all motivation for raising children and moving muscles.
They became functionally inert. The sources vividly described them as unable to muster the energy to get out of their hammocks or brush the crumbs off their bellies. Their energy output was minimal.
Only focused on consuming the basics: food, booze, and water. This profound inertia suggests that their motivation for just basic self-maintenance and logistical action was externally, not internally, driven.
There's one detail that perfectly captures this collapse of logistical effort.
The latrine.
The latrine. The father who demanded the boys dig a new latrine within drunken stumbling distance of his hammock, rather than just moving his hammock closer to the existing perfectly good latrine.
The lack of energy for even the most basic spatial problem solving is telling. It's the absolute opposite of the female bowerbird's efficient nest construction.
Meanwhile, the boys, free from female judgment and oversight, descended into total chaos.
It was Lord of the Flies experiment, but with gasoline and Jack Daniels. They were completely reckless, lighting underbrush on fire, blowing up bees' nests, playing chicken with motorboats.
Jumping off 40-foot cliffs into extremely shallow water.
And their recklessness wasn't just for fun. It was high-risk, high-status SS behavior directed at their male peers. They let cuts get pus-filled and infected, showing a blatant disregard for basic survival and health.
But the interesting analytical point is what made them change. The motivation for behavioral correction wasn't hunger or injury or boredom, it was the deadline.
The approaching deadline to return to the roost.
Only on day 6, when the threat of female judgment loomed, did the fathers suddenly snap out of it.
They dragged themselves out of their hammocks, used soap, changed their shirts, sobered up. Then they ordered the boys to scrub the fly-ridden pots, returning to some semblance of discipline.
And that final, revealing detail. Checking for leeches so mother doesn't see.
That simple phrase is the key. It confirms the inference. The father's logistical energy, their discipline, their attention to detail, it was all entirely dependent on the competitive, judgmental environment of the roost, the presence of women.
When the mating pressure was off, the SS display was suspended, and the need for basic NS-hone logistical efficiency just vanished, giving way to profound hammock-bound inertia.
Okay, so if the Boy Scout anecdote showed the inertia of the display specialist when the audience leaves, the next set of observations provides extremely specific, almost quantifiable behavioral evidence for these claimed specialization differences.
This comes from a professional nanny's sweeping generalization that, according to the source, never had a single exception.
Men may be the man of the house, but women rule the roost.
This section sharply contrasts the alleged SS specialist, the dad, with the ENS logistics specialist, the mom, in a high-stakes scenario, coordinating childcare logistics. The sources give 2 specific dialogue scenarios that capture this essential cognitive difference.
Let's start with the father on the phone. The nanny calls, asking a basic, crucial logistical question. What time does Maurice need his medicine?
And the father's immediate response is just pure avoidance and outsourcing. Well, my wife is not here, so...
And then, we always make decisions together, and I don't want to get in trouble. He frames a simple logistical question as a potential marital conflict, rather than a functional problem he needs to solve.
He is totally incapable of providing basic facts about the dosage or the schedule. When the nanny mentions the child needs Zelda, he replies, I have a kid named Zelda now.
He doesn't even know the name of his child's favorite stuffed animal. A critical piece of emotional security logistics for that kid. And when he's pressed on whether the nanny needs to pick up Clarice, he struggles to calculate the time and the route.
And the absolute killer detail, the one that illustrates the pure absence of NS-level organizational readiness, is when the nanny asks him to just take a message.
He stalls, and then explains. I'm not sure. There's no pen here.
A creature designed for grandstanding, capable of accumulating vast resources, is rendered functionally helpless by the lack of a basic writing tool. His focus is entirely external, on display, not on internal functional organization.
Now, contrast that profound logistical failure with the mother on the phone. The dialogue scenario shifts instantly to an overwhelming granular level of detail. Her specialization is entirely focused on health, safety, and scheduling down to the most minute 5-minute increment.
She launches into the required information instantly. No preamble, no deflection, just total command of the situation. I gave Maurice his medicine at 8:20 in the car to time it, so he gets his next dose at 12:20 as he's finishing his lunch.
She isn't just reciting a schedule. She's calculating future state needs based on past state variables. A 5-minute timing adjustment to optimize the next dose with the completion of a meal. That's next level.
Her focus is entirely proactive and logistical. She provides weather-appropriate clothing needs, not just generally, but specifically, the blue jacket for overcast recess. She has already anticipated every variable.
But the most impressive part is the level of emotional and behavioral logistics she's managing. Clarice is still upset about what her friend Jane said to Jill about Joanna concerning the boy she likes. So I need you to tell her she's pretty at 3.15 on the way to band camp, where she'll see Joanna.
Hold on. She's not just juggling medicine and weather and transport. She has pre-calculated a specific moment for a piece of tactical social diplomacy. A confidence boost timed precisely to avert a potential social crisis. The working memory for that is incredible.
It demonstrates a specialization in survival logistics and social maintenance that is incredibly energy intensive. And when the poor, overwhelmed nanny admits they need to write all this down.
The mother's response is the final word on efficiency. I already did. It's pinned to the phone you're holding. It's a completely airtight, pre-packaged logistical system.
The conclusion drawn from these observations summarizes the generalization. Moms specialize in memorizing their kids' schedules down to 5-minute increments, knowing all their friends, emotional needs, logistical pathways.
And dads, conversely, can barely keep the goldfish straight and are considered lucky if they can just follow the explicit written orders pinned to the phone.
And this alleged specialization is given a biological rationale by the sources. Sperm makers specialize in sex and violence, making them worse mothers. Their evolutionary imperative is focused on competition, display, and grandstanding, the high-cost, high-reward SS behavior.
While the mother's imperative, by contrast, is laser-focused on efficiency, resource management, threat assessment, and the immediate logistical survival of the offspring, pure NS specialization.
Which explains perfectly why the male bowerbird builds the gorgeous but useless bower, and the female builds the efficient but boring nest.
So, if we step back and synthesize the findings of this deep dive, the source material presents a clear, comprehensive, and I have to say highly provocative argument.
It is. The argument is that art, genius, and complex achievement are not evolutionary luxuries. They aren't useless, they are genetically useful. They're the ultimate high-cost display of mental and physical fitness, the human bower.
Right. We've established that our mate choices, our aesthetic and intellectual turn-ons, are the most powerful evolutionary force, moving much faster than the passive selection of the environment.
We are constantly selecting for the traits we value: intelligence, wit, creativity, making mate choice, the dynamic engine of our own complexity, just like the bowerbird's aesthetic judgment.
From Picasso's extravagant output and the Boy Scout fathers only moving when they had to face the women again, to the contrasting parental roles we just discussed, the thread is the same. Humans work for reproductive currency, whether we consciously know it or not.
Because we inherited genes that reward the urge to succeed and display. That's the critical takeaway. We make hundreds of conscious and subconscious choices every single day. Who we date, who we marry, whose art we consume, who we admire.
And those choices influence the future genetic and behavioral landscape of our species.
We are, quite literally, creating the next generation's mind and body through our preference for ostentatious, sometimes wasteful, creativity and intelligence.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to carry forward. Based on this powerful premise from the source material, that human endeavors are ultimately just highly complex, culturally acceptable versions of the bowerbird's success imperative.
That the underlying drive is this reproductive currency.
We have to ask, if the point is high-cost signaling, what modern human endeavors, beyond just traditional art, are merely highly complex versions of the bowerbird's ostentatious, wasteful, but ultimately successful Taj Mahal?
Is spending years dedicated to winning a Nobel Prize, risking life and limb climbing Mount Everest, or accumulating vast, non-essential wealth, simply a modern Baroque way of saying, look at my focus, my resources, and my willingness to endure high cost, purely to attract the most discerning mate?
Think about the effort, the complexity, and the sheer lack of immediate survival utility in those things. When you consider your own ambition, your own drive to succeed, what is your bower?